boats and stuff like that all the time. And so our personal favorite in our family was letting them watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because we would always be like, Bueller, anyone? They had no idea what we were talking about, and they loved Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So it's fun sometimes to bring those oldies back that are part of our cultural norms and not theirs.
We had a discussion during our CT yesterday because we're working on this project, and they have new directions every week when we do it. So what you were working on? No, do it this way. And but they said something about all the research references needed to be like within the last 10 years. And I raised my hand and I say, so anything Fred Rogers says is bogus, right? And they went, well, then there's the tried and true. You know, there's so yeah.
Mary Kay, what is CT?
Oh, I'm sorry, collaborative team. It's our name for what we have to do together for ProPay or QComp. It's called different things in different districts. And our coordinator has mandated this year that the entire staff will be a collaborative team. And we will work on one project together, and we will all have input into every outcome. It's a little complex.
Do others of your districts have things similar to that?
We definitely do not in Northfield.
We have QComp,
Okay,
and then we do PLCs.
yes.
Ellen, do you get QComp?
I don't even know what that is. I hear people talk about it. We have PLC, but we don't do QComp.
It's quality compensation, and there's a lot of rules. Districts have to sign up to get it. I think it's from the state, but not every district does it. And you have to work over 0.4 FTE to qualify for it, which really stinks because so many parent educators are working less than 0.4. And in my district for the last 2 years, I was below 0.4, but still had to do all the work, did all the CT, did all the project, all the stuff, just didn't get the compensation at the end of the year that people who worked more than 0.4 got. So, but this year I worked 0.46, so I'm qualified for the first time. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it varies from district to district, and the district has to sign up for it.
I also know there must be some variance in how much you have to work, because I work 0.2. And I've been on QComp.
And you get the compensation?
I do.
Okay, that is kind of interesting to know. I wonder if that's a state thing or a district thing, because my colleague works, literally she works 0.39, and they're like, sorry. And she works way more hours than that, but that's her official class hours or whatever. And so she gets to do all the work and doesn't get the whatever it is at the end of the year, $1,000 or something. I don't remember what it is, but she doesn't get compensated at the end of the year.
Well, we weren't on QComp in our district until we're still on an addendum to the teacher's contract. Okay. And so we didn't get QComp until some point after we got on to until we were at least an addendum. Before that, we were just community ed. You know, we do a lot of daycare down here, they said.
That makes me so mad. Sorry, big reactions. But yeah, I'm lucky in Maplewood, we're connected to all the teacher stuff. So ECFE is part of the teacher contract in Maplewood.
Yeah, EBE and ECFE are still an addendum here, but we're an addendum to the teacher contract. So
step in the right direction, at least, right?
Yes.
Well, I have a little follow-up from our ELL conversation a couple of weeks ago that took up our whole time. My last 2 weeks have actually been really good. I planned on Monday to let my early childhood colleague know that if there was only one parent, we weren't going to separate. And I could see when I even started to say it in a very like, so I was thinking kind of way, instead of a declaration, her walls just go right up of like, yep, nope, that's not going to work. You could just see it before she said a word. And she thought about what she was going to say. And then she said, here's the thing. If you don't separate on Tuesday, it makes it really hard on Thursday. So for whoever comes on Thursday, if they didn't separate on Tuesday with not knowing what to expect, because on Thursdays, there's no parent-child time. It's just separation for the entire time. And I was like, okay, I hear that. That makes sense, but this isn't working for me with our current setup. And we changed one thing that seems like not a big deal, and it made a huge difference, which is we now we start on the playground, and when we come in to wash hands, and we would normally do circle time and parent-child time in the early childhood classroom, we separate in the hall right away, and we go to parent ed time for the first half of class instead of the second half of class. And it's been a night and day difference for me. My own attitude is like so much better. I'm like fresh, I'm right there, and it's like, let's do this. There's a better chance of having more than one parent at the very beginning. But this last week, I only had 2 parents, and it still went okay. And then when we go back, I also feel like I have a little more control over how much time we spend. I always let Michelle know, but it's like I've been able to limit it to like, we're just doing from 1:30 to 2:30. We're coming back at 2:30. And so I'm not doing an hour and 15 minutes. I'm just doing an hour. And I have noticed, not just selfishly for me, but when we go back for the parent-child interaction time at the second half, the kids who were cranky and exhausted when they arrived because they needed a nap got to have a little nap. The kids got to have a little snack, and they're so excited for their parents to come back. They get a chance to really connect with mom and dad instead of being ready to go home. And the parents can maybe put into practice what we just talked about. Like, so it feels like it's better for everybody. We'll see how long it going well works, but that in combination with trying to do slides and translations of everything, so as many people as possible can at least know what I'm trying to talk about, that combo has been really good. So 2 good weeks after several really, really hard ones. Thanks everyone for the support a few weeks ago.
Well, it was a really illuminating conversation, I think, for everybody involved, Becca, because it sort of cascaded into a variety of intention and result and respect and context and, you know, settings and our own preparation for stuff. And, you know, I mean, I don't think there's really anything that we do is like a standalone issue. Everything seems to connect to everything. So no, it was a really, really helpful conversation.
I've got a question. If anybody has found a mask, a clear mask that works well. I have a family who is deaf. Well, one mom is hard of hearing, the other mom is deaf. Child is hearing. So I feel like so many of my nonverbal expressions are lost. You know, and so I would really like to wear a mask. And our interpreter has one, but she got it from Mayo, and she's like, yeah, I don't know that I can get you one from Mayo. So just curious if anyone has happened to find one that they can recommend.
I know Amazon sells them. The district
But they have
bought-
such oh, did they?
the
But
district
there's so many
bought
hit or
them
miss
all for us.
results on them.
Right.
Okay.
So I can ask my speech team what they use, because my speech
Oh,
team,
yeah, I didn't think about
they
that.
have different things that they do, because when they're in their one-on-one speech sessions, they're not wearing a full mask that covers their face because children need to see the way that their mouth moves. So I can
Right.
talk to them, Ellen, and get back to you on what they are using.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. Cause I know the Amazon ones, like, there's 5,000 stars and 2,500 of them are, really great. And 2,500 say they suck. So I'm like, what do I believe? And they're not exactly cheap. So,
Ellen, if you know that they're getting them from Mayo, would you consider calling the suppliers at Mayo and see if they send you one or sell you one?
I definitely could. I feel like that's kind of they're already short staffed and like exhausted. And I feel like, can I have a mask with a window? You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of want to get one in the least possible amount of work for other people. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but
So-
the supply people are probably not the ones who are as swamped, and the nurses and doctors and people who are swamped, they'd really rather you had a functional mask that works for what you're doing. They would, I promise.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I could definitely do that.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah, for sure.
Susan, I don't know about Ellen's district, but in 622, you're not allowed to just use a visor. Because it
No,
doesn't,
we aren't either.
it doesn't trap enough.
Yeah, we aren't allowed visors either. It has to be a mask.
You're allowed to wear both, but you can't not wear the mask.
Yeah, wear both and like completely overheat and get a migraine and all the things that can happen with wearing those stupid shields.
Exactly.
They're awful.
It's kind of a personal, weird, random question, but has anyone ever had a long-term sub come in? And if so, what did you leave for them? What did you prepare for them? I'm trying to think ahead. I'm going on maternity leave in February, and I'm trying to think what would be helpful for an individual coming in, not knowing who is coming in, and just trying to think ahead of, I thought maybe like a one-page sheet of like, here's the generic information about each of my classes, the room numbers, the time, the schedule, who's the teaching team, any special notes that you need to know. But just curious, when you guys have subs, what do you leave them? I'm never gone. So this is a very new concept for me.
Or if you've worked as a sub, right? And what has been left for you.
Yes, thank you. That too.
Well, are they going to find a parent educator for you? Or are they going to just throw whoever's at it? Like, I kind of
I
feel like
don't
they
know
can't
the
just
answer to
throw
that question.
Oh my God. Okay. So my feeling is if they're not going to provide a parent educator long-term sub, it cannot possibly be your job to prepare that person for 8 week, 9, 10, whatever weeks of class for all your classes and all your topics.
12 weeks, 7 classes each week.
You can't possibly prepare a sub for
And
that.
I
No,
have not
you
asked the
can
question
provide-
yet. I have not asked yet. And because right now we're still getting our district, our coordinator, my boss, just acquired an entire new set of preschool staff. And, she's currently just trying to continue to keep the first half of the school year afloat. And given that I have till February, if everything goes well, I don't necessarily want to give her at least through MEA before I go in and ask, hey, just out of curiosity, what is the requirement for what I leave this person? Because I want to give enough time for her to really wrap her head around what she's doing and be respectful of that. But I'm also like a plan ahead person. So in my brain, trying to keep myself mentally prepared for this big change, like what can I do now to try and help this person? And then just knowing that go ahead.
Do you have lesson plans for all of your do you have at least one lesson plan for every class, for every topic?
For the most part, but I think what I'm gonna
Okay.
do is go through and then, like, every week, pick one topic and just go through that lesson plan and make sure that I have appropriate notes. Cause I'm really just notorious for having a loose lesson plan, and then I can pretty much
Yes.
fill in the blanks myself.
Yep,
And then I've
as
realized,
we do as professionals.
right, so I've realized over the years that I'm like, oh, I actually need to write you notes. I can't just leave you my general outline of thoughts. So that's my plan, is to go back through my lessons and make sure I have adequate notes for everything. I'm also not sure if it's going to be one person covering me or if my classes will get divided and there'll be a few people.
I can tell you what I would have appreciated as a sub. I haven't really done much subbing, only a little bit, and definitely not long term for parent ed, but I was an elementary school substitute. As a parent ed, I would want to know, especially because you said last week that your classes kind of function as a full year, right? I would want to know which topics have already been talked about. So there's some kind of history of like, okay, I know I wasn't here, but I know you talked about temperament or you talked about this or that. So thinking back on that, so you have some frame of reference for what has already been discussed and you're not bringing up old stuff as a new thing, or you know what they know to a certain extent. I think that would be super helpful. I think if I were to be getting all of the classes, just having one solid lesson plan that I could like get an idea of your normal from would be good. And then having like, these are the topics, like, and this is all assuming you have a parent educator who's educated as a parent educator who can lesson plan. It's like these are the topics that I was planning on covering. Here are a few of my example lesson plans. But you can go with it, or you know what I mean? Like a little bit of freedom for the parent educator to do what they feel most comfortable doing, but also enough framework to provide them something. If it's a different person every day, then it's like you almost need a new lesson plan provided for them if they don't have it prep time to figure out lessons on their own at all.
Yeah. And Abby, thank you for your input too. I agree. I think if this person can come and observe me, that would be amazing because it'd be so much more helpful for me to walk them through everything. I do have a colleague who, her and I collaborate on almost everything we do, and she has been amazing and is just like, let's go through everything, make sure we got everything prepared. And then she's assured me, she's like, I will help this person or people, you know, if they get into a bind or if things come up. So that makes me feel a little better.
I would also probably love a little note about each class. Like, just here's the parents, you know, if there's a dynamic or if there's a history there or something you need to know that is maybe private information about a certain family, but is helpful for the parent ed to know, just little notes to let them have a little clue as they're coming in halfway through the year.
Naomi, one of the things, I've done a lot of subbing, but not in parent ed. I have done a lot of subbing in parent ed in our district because we don't have any other, we're the only group that doesn't use the subsystem in our district. We sub for each other. So, and my colleagues leave great information, unless, you know, they're like hospitalized and, and then then I'm just going with what I know. One of the things I would suggest is because of the significant possibility that it may not be a trained parent educator, I would probably leave handouts for everything that because, you know, they could go online and get the how to potty train your toddler at 18 months old in 3 days with M&Ms. And, you know, I mean, and it might not be what you would hope to be sharing. So it could be educational for the teacher who's going to be doing that too. That would be really helpful, I would think.
No, it's a good idea too. I also feel, again, fortunate that I have this colleague and her and I share our lesson folder with each other. So she could access any lesson I potentially have created in the past. But I appreciate the input. Like I said, I'm just a very like plan ahead person. And as much as I'm mentally preparing myself, because my family has a history of going over by 2 weeks to the point of induction. So in my head, I'm like, okay, that's a possibility. But I also have family members who, you know, have gone extremely early. So in my head, I'm like, I want to just make sure that I have something, like as you said, Mary Kay, if someone's hospitalized overnight, if over a weekend or over an evening, all of a sudden I'm not back, I don't want to leave my team high and dry, because that wouldn't make me feel very good.
The other thing, Naomi, that I would put kind of what Becca was saying would be to make sure that you leave a note saying, if you feel like you're not effective, like remember that these parents are coming here for connection with each other. They're coming to give their kids time to socialize. Like, give your sub the space to feel like it's okay if they don't get to everything in the lesson. Do you know what I mean? So kind of make sure that they feel, because especially if it's not actually a trained parent educator, they're going to be like, what in the world am I doing? Right? So just help them understand that making sure the parents have time to talk to each other and connect with each other. And that's the biggest part. Do you know what I mean? So kind of give them a rah, like what parent ed is about in a paragraph.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that.
And Naomi, you could invite them to join us on Fridays.
I'll invite them. Yes. I'll let them know that this is a connection. Someone please.
And as during your leave, I mean, I don't know how much you want to do this, but I remember when I was on maternity leave, for a while, it was like fun to watch daytime TV, just as sort of a sociocultural exercise of what people are exposed to. And then after a while, it was, like too much. And anyway, so you may be back, right? You may not be back, but you'd be here, right? You could join us anyway. But as you're talking, and as Ellen's, great ideas about, just notes of encouragement and stuff is, if the sub, I think it'd be really challenging if they have no background in parenting ed, right? But if they're relatively new or they're feeling underconfident stepping into new classes or whatever, I mean, what better group to kind of give them support than this one? So, please extend the invitation if they want to join us.
I was also thinking too, like talking to your families about it in your classes and seeing if there may be one parent that feels competent to like help that sub out, that may have information or that can just maybe help facilitate as well. Not that you're putting your job on a parent, but
no, but at least someone who can help them out throughout class.
Right. Or who could provide that encouragement or be like, oh, we're fine just talking today, because I mean, in my experience, parents do such a fantastic job of just coming together talking. We in our district, we don't have any subs either. So it's usually or in the past, it's been us subbing for one another, or we just have to leave our class. Like the parents just have to do it themselves without us because we just don't have that.
We've done that too, where it's like, okay, guys, you're going to separate, you're going to go to the parent ed room.
Yeah.
And this is your day to this is the time you come back. This is your day to just talk. Obviously, that's less worst case scenario, but
right. And
that's a good reminder too, though.
That our families have really enjoyed that, coming back, asking them like, oh, what'd you talk about? They're like, oh, we talked about this and this and this. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you wanted to talk about, but it's just something that came up. So that too, just kind of getting the parents or maybe the parents' expectations of what they're thinking is going to happen when you leave, because obviously there's a comfort with you right now. So just a thought.
No, I appreciate it. And yes, Yuji, it would be amazing if this person could start a couple weeks before I'm supposed to leave. And it'd be wonderful if they could shadow me and just get to know my classes and kind of, get a feel for how I do classes. But obviously make it their own. Because
think it would
whoever
help
this
the
is a 12
transition
weeks.
to
Yeah, because I
for
do
them.
intend to take the full 12 weeks of FMLA. So it's not a short, 6-week, it's a full.
That'd be a pretty generous school district, I think, though, that would pay to have that kind of overlap.
I think for our preschool teachers last year who went on leave, I believe their long-term sub, because we had 2 teachers that back-to-back maternity leaves, basically one came back just in time for the other one to leave. Their one sub that was hired, she was able to stay. Like, she came in a week, I think, before, because the first teacher who left had a scheduled C-section, so she knew the date she was leaving. So we were able to get her in, the new teacher in. She was able to kind of shadow for a week and then start. But again, there's a lot of questions that I haven't asked my coordinator, and I'm sure I'll get information from her on what the district expectation is. But I'm just thankful and grateful to hear some ideas of like what would be helpful to leave this person or persons.
I also think some connection activities too, so the families can get to know that sub or the subs. Just some fun, easy, kind of lighthearted things to do. Although your class has formed that, hopefully, the safe, secure environment to talk, they don't have that with the new sub. So leaving some connection activities too, which might buy you a week or two, like not lesson plans.
That is very true. And fortunately, we do have guest speakers too. So I am trying to make sure that I sprinkle in and save some of my guest speakers for the spring when I'm not here. Just so a few of those weeks I can alleviate some lesson plans that I have to do. I'm also going to have my families, when we get back from winter break, and I do this anyways in my classes, but when we get back from winter break, I am going to have them fill out another topic survey of like, what's on your mind, what's, at the forefront of your parenting right now, and what should we be preparing for. So I kind of have an idea, and I want to make sure that my families feel included in that, where the lessons that I leave are ones that they are actually interested in.
How about COVID protocols at the school? I'm just thinking, just from one of the joys of doing this, of the many, is I gain a greater perspective about your different school districts and how school district operations vary across the state. And even doing that research that we did in the spring, just listening to different resources that school districts offered, or sort of guidance and school districts that never went online and were always still together, and the ones that varied anyway. So I guess I'm just thinking, if there are, because they'll probably get the standard stuff of this is how we're dealing with COVID, but then there's also the reality of what is harder, and and maybe any tips or tricks that you've learned that could be helpful to the new person. I just do hope you get like somebody with a parenting ed background.
One of my colleagues is doing her student teaching starting in January. And I was like, number one, I'm bummed because I really wanted to be around when she was doing it because I thought it'd be really fun. And number two, I'm like, if you only would have started like a couple months earlier, I was like, you could have just taken my maternity leave and it would have been so much easier.
They couldn't hire her on a variance, could they?
She would be doing her student teaching with, like, during that time is when she's student teaching. So she's going to be swamped.
Yeah.
Student teaching on top of her, because she's our intercultural liaison. So
okay.
She's going to be balancing a lot on the plate, and she already is. And I would never ask that of her, but.
So Naomi, tell us about impending parenthood and your feelings about that.
We're pretty excited. We found out a week and a half ago that we're having a little girl. So we're both pretty pumped about that. I've been a parent ed for 6 years and have been a parent ed without kids. And so I'm excited to be able to relate to my families on a little bit of a different level. My hope is, with my career, that one of the things I do appreciate about being a parent ed without kids is I don't bring in my own bias of how I raised my kids. And I take a very strong approach of these are the different ideas that are out there right now that, are being talked about and which one fits you best. So my hope is to be able to continue to kind of keep that mindset in my teaching, but we're excited. My husband and I, this has been a very long process to get to, and we're just excited that it's finally happening for us. So be a lot of growing pains in our house. My husband has little to no experience with kids whatsoever. So this will be new for him, which I'm really excited for him to experience. He's an amazing uncle and really enjoys all of our nieces and nephews. And my sister just had a baby in July, so they'll be 8 months apart. And my husband is best friends with my brother-in-law. So he's been hearing some parenting journeys from him. But overall, we're just really excited.
I bet the parents in your classes are super excited for you.
I have a lot of parents. Yes, they are super excited for me. In our hallways, when you first enter our building, we have little about me posters for each of the staff with pictures and just information about who we are. And so I've been running into a lot of my former families who are super excited too, just because, a lot of them have been with me for the last 5 years and kind of know our journey and how long this has taken us. So it's kind of fun to be able to share some of that joy with them too.
How has that been? And this is a general question, and partly I'm asking in sort of my role as facilitator, thinking of other people who may be watching our video as well. But this reality of being a parenting educator without having children, and because it's something that oftentimes, so I teach undergraduates now, right? And these are mostly students between about the ages of 20 and 23, 24. And it's very hard to sell these kids on the idea of becoming parenting educators because it's just such a foreign concept of being a parent, except for those that actually are. And but we will have a few, or for people who sometimes will apply to the parent ed program, they'll go, well, I don't know, or they're a master's student, and they'll say, well, I don't know, I don't have kids yet, and their biggest concern is that the parents in their classes won't believe them, like that they won't see them as valid teachers, because they don't have direct experience as being a parent. And could we just talk about that for a moment? I'd love to hear your perspectives about it, because again, it's not terribly uncommon, and we have kind of our standard, including Naomi, your lack of bias. We've also shared that, and we also will pull on a lot of students have tremendous experience in childcare, right? Or working as early childhood aides, and they have so much perspective on kids' temperament and kids' development and all of that. But again, with almost that distancing that they're not their own children. So they're a little more. And then finally, I will say, and I know some of you have heard this anecdote before, but years ago, I think it was probably 2008, 2009, in the parent and family ed program, we had a student who had just joined the program. She was a mom, and she was saying that she was really excited to be a parenting educator because she wanted to basically teach teach parents how she parents. Like, she was so excited about being a parent that she was gonna like spread the gospel of her. Yeah, I know. Like, Becca, your response, and I'm like going, you know, kind of not the point here, but you know, it's a starting place. Anyway, so would you guys mind, could we just take a couple moments? I would really love to hear your perspectives or experiences about the kind of the value of being a parent if you're parenting educate in your practice, or Naomi, your experience or others' experiences of not being a parent and how that's settled for you and maybe affected your teaching.
I've got something that kind of relates. I replaced a parent educator who was significantly older than I was. Like, she retired and I replaced her. And she was wonderful and warm and everything. But a lot of people said she was really great. And I think she was like a warm, comfortable grandma. But a lot of people just felt like she was too old. Like, she wasn't connecting with them as well because she had been so far removed from parenting. You know, so I kind of the opposite end, like, and I'm just like, oh God, I hope, you know, in a couple of years, I'm like, my kids are out of the house. Like, Megan's like, oh my God, yeah. But then the other parent educator who was there, her children were all grown. She had, you know, all kids out of the house. And she became a grandma, you know, several years later, but they didn't feel the same way about her. So I think you can be connected with, you know, I think there's a way you can still acknowledge where young families are, even though you're not in it. And I have also had parents say to me, wow, you know, they'll be like, how old are your kids? And I'm like, oh, as of Sunday, they're going to be, you know, 16 and 15 and 13. And they're like, oh, wow, you just seem like you still have little kids. And I take that as a compliment because, I mean, obviously I'm living it all the time, every day at work, but I think that it's valuable, but I also think you can really work hard at connecting with those younger families. So watch out if you get too old, because then you're just grandma at ECFE.
I feel like for me, it was a lot of my first few years, because I was pretty young. I took a year off between my undergrad and then going back for parent ed, but I mean, I'm a product of ECFE. I like to share with parents. Like, my parents did ECFE. My mom works in ECFE. Like, it's been a part of my life since I was a small child. But I felt like when I first started, I did a lot of like trying to, in that first couple of weeks, build a relationship, but also in some ways like build myself up so parents actually respected what I had to say. I mean, I had several years of childcare under my belt. I had been a lead teacher in a daycare setting for a few years. You know, I had done different things, and I was fortunate enough too that I nannied, like the family that I nannied for 7 years, they both traveled. And so I would be the live-in nanny. I would go stay with the kids and drop them off at daycare and go to work and pick them up and go home and make dinner and put them to bed and all that stuff. So I had a little taste of what that was like. But I really had to prove to my families and build that relationship, and also let them know that, and I still do this in my class today, but I say, you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't, and I won't. You all bring something to this room and to this group that is valuable. There's going to be, you know, different things that we bring up in our discussions. And I might turn back to some of you veteran parents who have older kids in the room and ask you how you did it. And then I'm going to ask someone else how they did it, because, you know, I really try hard to build the relationships in my class where parents know that they can go to each other, that they don't have to look to me for all of the answers.
I think starting out your parent ed education before you become a parent is actually an amazing foundation, because it gets you that history and that comfort with not interjecting your own lived experience. I think that's actually a really amazing thing to have, that could probably help you be a better facilitator with what has your experiences been like to the parents at the table, instead of automatically thinking of your own. And I don't think that you will lose that. When you add your own experience to that, you will still have that history of practice and that comfort level with helping parents turn to each other with, here's what research shows as some best practice ideas. I personally feel kind of the exact opposite of the person Susan was talking about, thus the huge facial expressions, like, because I can't hide anything. But like when I became a parent educator, it was as much to empathize and commiserate with the challenges of rising to expectations, way more than it was that I've got all the answers, right? Like it wasn't that. So like the comment Kelly made about sometimes feeling like a hypocrite, like I'm super transparent about that. I was like, hey, look, this is what the studies show, and I'm not able to do this at home. Or, like, so even when I am adding my own personal experience, it's usually to make sure they understand that I'm not this perfect parent, because that's intimidated and does not provide a comfortable, safe environment for parents to share their struggles. So I feel like the biggest gift my having kids has brought to the table has been my experience with 3 really different, really challenging kids. But I also, like Susan mentioned, and like your experience, Naomi, I was a nanny for like 10, 15 years beforehand. I was also a postpartum doula before having a child. So I had that, like, I was a parent before I became a parent educator, but that's a different kind of parent education, the postpartum doula. And yeah, I think when you add your own experience to it, as long as you don't lose that foundation you already have, it's just going to enrich your teaching. It's not going to lessen it.
I had 2 student teachers that were both not parents, and one was a female, one was a male. And it affected them. They were like, why would these parents buy into anything that I say? I don't have kids. And it was along those same lines of what experience do you have? Oh yeah, you worked in a daycare for 10 years. You nannied, you have nieces and nephews. You can bring that experience into, and then I think, Naomi, like you said, turn it around to the parents. Like collective wisdom is what happens in our classes. And so I think that we, like, even though some of us aren't parents, or I have older kids as well, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be irrelevant pretty soon in this age group, what I'm teaching. I always feel like, oh, that I'm having a hard time with that too. Like, oh yeah, my kids are so much older than, the infants, toddlers, 2-year-olds that I'm teaching. But I'm in it, and right, I'm in an early childhood classroom every day, and I get to see kids, and so I don't know. I see, like Ellen, you were saying, both sides. I saw student teachers who let that fumble them through the field, through student teaching, and I just had to keep building up because of that. And then on the other side of having older kids, and then watching my parent eds who I loved, who I had as a parent, retire. And that was hard too, watching them leave the field. And so I don't know. It's definitely been something I've been thinking a lot about lately, especially because I want to feel relevant and fresh and new to my families. I just keep reading and doing a lot of research.
And that's kind of what keeps me going too, is I just, I try and stay on top of what's going on. I think too, I also was incredibly fortunate that for my student teaching, I had an in with Bloomington, and my mentor who supported me all through student teaching and really all through my education. And I was first with Bloomington. She was a parent ed, and she has been for years, but she started off without kids. Like, she was not in any relationship whatsoever when she got her parent ed license and went through her whole life, adult life journey as a parent educator. And so she was the one I think that really helped build me up through my student teaching, because I did have a lot of doubts and I was like, why am I here? But then I reminded myself, as a children's teacher, my favorite time of day was drop off and pick up. I loved connecting with the parents at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And that is why I sought out my parent ed license, was because I wanted to make more connections with those parents.
I think it kind of depends on that relationship, because before I was a parent ed and I was a parent myself, one of my parent educators was not a parent, and she was on the younger side. Like, she went from undergrad straight into the program, and that was difficult from a parent's perspective, because I felt like she couldn't relate. Like I forget who said it, but that you couldn't buy into, why would parents believe this stuff? Like, it was kind of like that. I felt more like, I don't know. It was just harder on that way. So I can see why some people could feel that, but I know that's not just because, it's just the relationship. So it's not, you could not have kids and be completely fine and great. It's just, it was difficult for me as a parent to listen, because I was like, you haven't been here, you know what the book says, but the book and what happens not always mesh, So that was.
I think my early years, I was that parent ed. It took me a couple of years of trying new things. And I'm fortunate that, like, with QComp and, my peer coach and everything, that has been my focus my entire career, is how do I help build relationships between my parents, and also make sure that I'm checking in with my parents and saying, how is this class feeling for you? How is this going? Do you feel like your needs are being met? Is there something more that I can do to help make this a more supportive environment for you? And I've taken a lot of criticism. Every year there's a group survey that goes out to all of the ECFE families, and every year there's one parent that's got a comment about me not being a parent, and that hurts, especially because they don't know my story. But I also take that as like, okay, I need to be more aware of what's going on in my classroom and make sure that I build those connections with my parents, and try really hard not to come off as this is how you're supposed to do it, but more come off as, here's some different ideas of things to try at home, because not all your kids are the same. And I do a lot of reminding parents that this is an environment where you take away the pieces that fit your family. You take some of those ideas and put them in your back pocket, because it might not be relevant right now, but you might need it down the road. And some of the things we share in this classroom are not relevant to you, and that's okay. You don't have to try everything. You don't have to do everything, because ultimately you get to decide what happens in your house. And I'm just here to support you with questions that you have.
I think that's key, Naomi. I think that's the crux of the whole thing, is always relationships, right? And if the relationship that they see that they have with you is as the expert judge who doesn't get it, then that's not going to be good. Then they are going to write you off, right? But if the relationship they have with you is the supportive person who's listening and encouraging, then the fact that you haven't had your own kids will be irrelevant, right? Because it's just like you're listening to them, you're there with them, and that's the important part. So it's just really all about the relationship you cultivate.
I think part of that too is seeing so many parents come into the program and being so thankful, and then some of them every year going to grad school to become parent eds. Like that, I was a parent of my 1-year-old when I started ECFE, or my oldest at the time was 1, and I started ECFE, and I just fell in love with the program. And then when my second was born, I went back to grad school. I was like, I got to do this for a living. I have to be, and maybe it's commiseration, right? Like Becca, you were saying, like,
Oh, that was totally my story, Megan.
I was
That's
like,
why I
what?
had to keep going with DCFE. There's no way I was going to let them graduate me out of the program. No
Me
way.
neither. Me
Same.
neither. I was like telling my husband, I was like, we have to just keep having more kids. So like, I could just stay. Like,
No,
you know.
I needed to be done on that end.
But so I'm seeing a lot of families, and I keep pointing them right to the program at the U. It's like, oh, we need parent eds, we need parent eds, we need parent eds. Go, 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 you know.
You know, I've had a couple families who say, tell me about your degree. What do you have? Because I want to do this. And I was like, oh, I want you to do this, you know? And I take that as like the ultimate compliment. Like they get so much out of it and they think they can do it. And I'm like, yeah, go do it. I had to share something that I had happen this morning. I have a mom who took a long maternity leave. So she was in my newborn class for 12 weeks. And then she participated in my 3 to 12 month baby class. And now she's going back to work since we don't have class next week with MEA. And she just said, I just had to tell you, she said, I've been attending another ECFE class in the evening with my husband in another district. She said, I was only here for, a couple months. She said, but I made more relationships here than I did in the other district because you allowed us to connect with each other. And I was like, tell me more. No, I'm like, it was like, yes, I like these ego strokes, but I do want to know. And I said, what was that like? What's the other program like? And she said, you come in and the parent educator had an agenda and there were questions and out you went. And she said, I haven't made connections with any of the parents there. So I think how you run the classroom too has a bearing on, and I said, are you going to continue over there? And she's like, I don't think so, because I don't really know anybody. She said, the only reason I go is so my husband gets to hear some of the same things, so that I think is a big piece too, making sure, encouraging those relationships with people. So.
Hey, Ellen, you know what?
Yeah, Gigi.
Read my assignment paper. You will see how you connect this family in your class.
Oh, did you send me your paper? I haven't looked at my email.
Yeah, I just sent today. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, that's exciting. I came right out of class from 2 back-to-back classes this morning, so I haven't looked at my email. So.
Yeah, anyone. I just described the whole process objectively, and you will see the joy, and everyone will enjoy into be one of the people in the group, and I can see this person's point.
Thank you.
It's such a good reminder too, Ellen. Like I'm such a relationship person, but the part of parent ed that I stress out about as a new teacher is almost always the content piece.
Yes.
Like, am I getting enough content in? Was the content good? Was it accurate? Was it meaningful? Did they understand it? Like, it's always the content stuff that is like, is my stress point. And then remembering that it's just like, when you loosen up a little and go with the flow and listen more, the content is there and they need that, but it's really second seat to the relationship.
Yeah. And it's so hard when you feel like you had a group that just jammed, like there was just they melded and they, looked forward to it and they were awesome. And then you get this survey back and they're like, I wish we could have gotten to more of our topics. And I was like, but
you can't happy.
We had amazing conversations. And I know, okay, sorry, we didn't get to the one listed on the week of April 14th, but we talked about something else and it was awesome and everybody was invested. So I think not having published topic lists anymore is going to help me in that. Like they don't know what's coming. So I can't complain.
They don't know what they've missed or not, right?
Exactly.
I also think too, I've learned in my career.
Come back next year.
I've also learned too, though, that like you're going to have a few parents that are going to walk away and need to share some sort of critical feedback. And I've tried really hard to take that and take it for what it is as feedback and try really hard not to let it get me down, because most of the feedback I get is positive. Like I said, I always have that 1 or 2 people who are just, which I'm always curious, like I would love to know who that person is, because I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with them, like a really just candid conversation of like, you stuck it out the entire year and half of the class time you hated every second of it. I would love to know what kept you coming back. And when I gave this survey in January about how's it going and how are you feeling about the class, and you didn't give me any critical feedback, and then you wait for the one that goes straight to my boss. Can we talk about this? Like, what could I have done differently? But I've also learned that some of those people just, they came every week. Hopefully they took something away.
Yeah, and I think that there's I mean, you know, I that's something that I learned like 30 years ago of, you know, reading evaluations and seeing, you know, oh, I love this class, you suck, you know, and that I have so little control over that. And to just continue on my own improvement and, you know, all of that good stuff. But then as I've also gotten, I think, maybe a little bit more understanding of myself and personal psychology and things like that, it's just also, it's easier to kind of dismiss that because I know that that person is like, this is a source of power for them in some way, you know, that it's an anonymous survey, especially because it's anonymous, right? It's an anonymous survey, so they're venting. And it's just getting out to have some sense of control over their life, or to just be disagreeable because, I mean, sometimes they do it because it's a safe thing, because the rest of their life they have to give in to everybody else, you know, or whatever. So yeah.
There are just some really negative people out there who are only going to see that. I had in my student teaching semester, I had one parent want to meet me for coffee so she could talk about the U of M program because she was so interested in becoming a parent educator. So just like Ellen said, just the most amazing thing. It's like, yay, I did something well. And I was the student teacher, right? And someone else anonymously at the end of the year, something that didn't even go to my supervisor, it went straight to the St. Paul Public Schools supervisor of ECFE. It wasn't just my lead teacher or whatever. Must have somehow Facebook stalked me and found that I had said something negative one day and was like, there's a student teacher who's like saying awful things about the ECFE program, and it only could have been me. So I had to talk to the supervisor and be like, okay, I'm not sure what she is referencing. I looked through every single Facebook post I ever posted, and there was one where I'd had a really bad day and I had a list of things that were hard. And one of the things on the list was something to do with student teaching that day, which had nothing to do with the program overall at all. It was just like my personal experience. I was like, who does that? This is not someone I was friends with. But somehow she found a post and like tried to get me in trouble. Like, and I was like, how could I have had that in that same class where like relationship was so important and I had connected with people? And it was just like the two ends of the spectrum. You're gonna get people who get a power thrill or something out of like, ooh, look what I can do to you. And it's unfortunate.
So there's actually, so we're gonna have to wrap up. I've got to go. But as you're talking about that, Becca, this brings up something I want to talk about next week, which is Mean Girls, which is having cliques of parents in classes and parents that can poison the water and or can be so much into themselves and so that a new parent doesn't feel welcome because they're, and because it is a phenomenon I've seen personally, I've seen in my work with school districts, and I am just super curious your own experience with this. So, you can't join us next week, Becca. Well,
it's MEA and we're going out.
Oh, that's right. Should we
It's
even?
MEA. We're all going to be doing fun things. Maybe not, Megan. Are you doing?
Oh, so because this isn't fun. I understand, Ellen.
No, like not work things. Like we're going to be like far away from work things.
Y'all, I have to share, I know this is getting recorded. You can cut this part off the end or whatever. I have to share that for the first time in my life